Well, good day, and welcome to Mental Health and You. I'm your host, Cynthia Timms. Thank you so much for joining us again. So let's get to it. COVID, social justice. COVID and social justice. What has it been like for you? Are you a young person in this time? Are you an artist? How has it shaped your work? How has it redefined you, if it has at all? How has it impacted you politically, spiritually, personally, your livelihood, your friends, your family, you, everything that is you? How have you evolved in the time of COVID and social justice? To help me sort all of this out, if possible, I want to welcome my guest, Sim Desire. Hello.
Hey, hey, Cynthia. Thanks for having
Hey,
me.
how are you? Thank you for being a part of Mental Health and You.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
As I said in my introduction, as I spoke about COVID and social justice, how has it impacted you? Sim, Desire, you are an artist. You are a young person. You haven't been impacted by COVID as well as this movement.
hmm
And you're all over the place as far as artistic, but that's good. You're a filmmaker, you're a writer, you're an actor, you're a musician. Tell what has this time meant to you and to your generation, but to you personally.
Well, to me, I feel like, to be honest, when COVID first happened, I've started to feel a lot of shame because everybody were kind of panicking and freaking out. And not COVID, because obviously there was a lot of people getting affected and dying, but the actual lockdown. I feel like it was actually one of the best things that could have happened to me and for me. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it felt like once things locked down outside, it
Mhm.
felt like I finally had got permission to just be myself and spend time with myself and not have that fear of missing out and being in that race of like everybody's doing this and they're doing that and I can't catch up. And as you said, me doing so many different forms of art, it was really a lot of anxiety that I had coming into COVID. And when the lockdowns came, it was really like a breath of fresh air of like, wow, okay,
A
I can
breath of
actually,
yeah, that's interesting. How so?
well, for one,
Because you
I
talk
was,
about you being able to, you didn't have to be part of that, that movement. I mean, you didn't have that fear being locked out anymore. You didn't have, but talk about that more, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Can you explain that more?
sure. So it was really like the fear of missing out. I
Mm-hmm.
noticed this thing. I'm not really, as an artist, it's kind of like you need to be on social media and it gets really, really
Yes.
noisy. You're consuming so much. And I noticed that a lot of my art and a lot of the things I would say, think, feel would be so much influenced by what was going on social media. And so I don't know, sometimes I take hiatuses. Like right now, I've been on a pretty long social media hiatus, but when I leave it, I feels like I get a sense of myself back in a way where I just really just get to tune into what I'm saying, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. So to use that as an analogy, once the lockdown happened, it felt like not just social media. Well, I did get off of social media at the time because it was so overwhelming, but it felt like that kind of
Yeah.
refreshing piece of like, oh, okay, let me just figure out what's going on with me and what I really want. There's so unpredictable. I don't know when we'll get out of this. I don't know if I'll be affected by this, if my family be affected by this. So it kind of just gave me a reminder, like to live day by day and kind of figure out what was most important and really not be influenced by everything on the outside. So,
Not be influenced by everything on the outside,
mhm.
but as an artist, we have influences coming from everywhere, whether we want to or not. So, being that what were you hearing? Okay, you weren't on social media, but what were you hearing maybe from your friends and from your family and your neighbors?
Well, I remember when the lockdown first happened, I was getting a lot of messages. I don't know if anyone else remembers, but I was getting these videos from like China, and it was people like dropping in the streets, and the news cycle was saying like we can have up to like 1.5 million deaths by the end of the year. So it was just a lot of hysteria. It was a lot of fear. And I'm of the philosophy that fear is the opposite of love. So I knew that once I got swept into it, that I was really losing myself, you know? And so, you know, I'm an artist and my name is Sim the SIRE. SIRE stands for self-realized individual relinquishing ego. And the
Mm-hmm.
essence of that is just being able to live in love and not live in fear. Because for me, I believe fear is something of the ego, or something of the mind, or something of the world. And so just like double down on what I meant in terms of those influences, I didn't want that to be my influence. And I caught myself because I actually was going to start a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
During the lockdown, I was like calling a lot of friends, trying to figure out how I could do it. And then I started like mapping it out, and I realized like I was just getting so drawn into the polarization of everything.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
realized there was so much misinformation going on, and I realized I was like acting out on emotions. And looking back, I'm like so glad I didn't, because I was just really being reactive, and I don't think I would have been doing myself the best service to myself and like the people who need the truth and people who might be looking to me for a certain, you know, message. So
Understood.
yeah.
Understood. I know, as I remember when it was first starting with me, when the pandemic was first starting, or first we first became aware of it. As a peer specialist, that's someone with lived experiences in the mental health field, which I work as now, who's trained to help others, as in through this medium, with my clients, with my fellow peers. I thought about, I must be honest with you. Part of me was almost in a disbelief. Um, but then as things started to, I guess, come to light more, it was a fear that came over me. I never had such a fear, I must say, of death
Mhm.
and dying, and that this could actually take me out,
Mhm.
you know? Um, Fortunately, I wasn't personally impacted in the sense that I never got diagnosed with it. But I had neighbors, I had friends, I had some relatives, I knew people. Um, I'm employed in a place where I saw death and dying almost every day. So, be that as it may, so how this thing, this unknown like monster that was in the air, how could I react to it? Yes, I was scared, but I also felt that in order to combat it, besides take precautions, I also had a responsibility. I had a responsibility. I still, in this time, for this show to keep going. And I also had a responsibility as an artist, which this is part of it, my
Mhm.
platform. So, as a musician, as a writer, as an actor now, where did it take you artistically? I'm asking. How
So
did it
thank you.
inform your thought?
Yeah.
How did it inform
Um,
your craft?
so one of the things, thanks for sharing that. You know, one of the things, you know, you asked that question and I was like, COVID was the best thing, but there was another side of it, right? Because I actually, as a singer, um, so I struggle with mental health, with depression, anxiety, and burnout. And what was
Mm-hmm.
happening was when I started out, finally putting myself out in about 2017, I had a nice run. I was able to um, basically, I was able to go from like going to open mics to having my own show with like over 100 people there. I was really proud of myself, but I didn't really have a support system. And so when things got really rough, I kind of just would isolate a lot. And it kind of came to a head in terms of me burning out and not really putting out music since I dropped my first song. And so when I said that the COVID lockdowns happened, I feel like it gave me a kind of a breathing room to kind of feel like, okay, everyone is at this stand still in a way where everything is kind of, everybody's as uneasy and as on edge as I was. And the thing about it was I damaged my voice around that time. So COVID did mess me up in a way because 3 days before they did the lockdown, and they put a stop on non-elective surgeries, I was supposed to have my surgery to correct my voice 3 days before they did that. So I had to wait the whole year to and I didn't know it would be a year. I wasn't sure what COVID had in store for everybody or for me. So I had to sit out the year in terms of having a bad voice. I couldn't begin speech pathology or vocal training. I couldn't sing. It was painful to talk. I couldn't speak at times. And so it was really, 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 really one of the toughest things, because as an artist, you know, I think a lot of artists really do connect to their art. So when they're not producing, they feel like they just aren't useful or they're not providing anything. So I struggle with that. And so I say all of that because I ended up getting my feet back. I got the surgery and everything, and I started becoming an artist, and then I caught COVID again. And what happened was it brought back all of the same fears and doubts and everything that I had before. But in terms of the product I was putting out, I channeled all of that passion into my art. And so now, and when I said like I had that time to quiet down and figure out what was most important, I realized like inspiring people and helping people to get out of this rut, because I was so familiar with it. But I was so familiar with the anxiety and depression and the fear. But this was a new thing that I was seeing in the world. Like people who were just normal in life, now they're the ones struggling with it. And I knew it so well. So I knew I had to step up in that kind of a role. You know, I was in a bunch of support groups, and it was good. It was healthy for me to kind of play that role in terms of being the support and not the one needing it in that kind of a way. I still need a support system, but, you know, just flipping that role. And that really showed itself in my art. You know, a lot of my art is about like, you know, we're going to get through this, just remembering your true essence. And it was a beautiful thing. And just to bring it back to what I was saying before, it's a complete contradiction to what I was going to go into it, which I think was a little bit fear-based. So I was able to have more compassion for myself and more compassion for my neighbors. So I think that really came through in my art.
More compassion for yourself and your neighbors. But then we're going to talk more about that compassion in the time of social unrest and COVID. But we're going to take a few minutes for the cause, run a PSA, and then we're going to talk about that compassion, self-compassion in the time of COVID and social unrest. We will be right back to Mental Health and You.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back.
when you want to talk, I'm here.
Wow. Welcome back to Mental Health and You. And I'm your host, Cynthia Timms. I want to thank you for coming back with us. And we were talking to my guest. We were in the midst of a conversation. Sim, the SIRE. And I welcome him back. Sim, thank you back. Thank you for coming back to Mental Health and You. Thank you again for being a guest.
No problem. I'm having fun.
When we left off, you mentioned something about self-compassion. not only for others, but for yourself. And we talk about that in peer support. As someone, as a peer specialist, as someone also who has dealt with depression and anxiety, oftentimes I've found that I am so hard on myself. I'm harder on myself than anyone. And we're taught to have compassion for others, but it's so hard to have compassion for oneself. So when you mention self-compassion, we talk about that in peer support. We talk about self-care. So now we find ourselves in the midst of COVID, in the midst of social unrest, where we want to talk about, because your artistry in the midst of social unrest, Black Lives Matter, which has, been all over the world, which has gone places to every corner, just as COVID has. So we have these things, these movements, these everything. We have people dying for COVID, people getting sick, but we also have people dying just because of the color of their skin. I often think to myself, I could have been Sandra Bland. I could have been Breonna Taylor. And so be that as it may, I felt that it was necessary not to avoid it, but to work through it by keeping this show going, by talking about it, by demonstrating my artistry with this show and in other formats, as a writer, as a photographer. So, but self-compassion, this is how I show my self-compassion, among other things. But let's talk about self-compassion. How have you shown yourself? So you talked about your artwork. You talked about your artistry. How has social unrest, for example, shaped your art?
So, I grew up in pretty gentrified Brooklyn. We had stop and frisk. I would have my car randomly searched and be randomly stopped all the time. It was, every time I see these things on the news about a young Black person or a Black person getting, unjustly killed by the police, or any of those situations, that really, it really hits me. And so, when this whole thing, when the protests and everything and the whole movement got elevated, it's been going on for a couple of years now, but it really just exploded last year. But when it happened, I realized I just had so much of this energy in me, right? Mm-hmm. And I realized it was almost like just being too aware of it was really triggering me. It was just triggering these old things that I never dealt with. And so this is one of the reasons why I loved that I had the time to just kind of spend with myself, because I realized these stimuli was just really bringing up these traumas that I never dealt with. I never dealt with my anger at the police and at the system, and at and how it affected my family, and how my mother, and how strict she had to be with me because she doesn't know and she's scared of me being outside as a teenager.
Yes.
And so it was a lot for me to understand and for myself. So when I say self-compassion, it was really just dealing with that, coming face to face with that, and having understanding for everyone else, because I used to be very angry. And so there was a lot of criticism going on about some of the violence and some of the stores getting looted or broken down. And I saw myself in that because I had that anger. Mm-hmm. So I just saw how our emotions and our trauma was being used in this way that can be self-destructive. And so I just gave myself that space to deal with my own trauma, to put it into my art. And really, it's one of the ways that I approached it.
I want to go back to something. You said you had COVID in the midst of everything. How was that as a young person?
So I was in. I caught COVID and I caught it bad. I caught it really bad. And I was one of the people who was willing to risk myself and my life because I felt like as dangerous as the virus was, it was dangerous for me to be in this prison mentally and like being confined. I felt like that was a sickness that I didn't want either. And so it really hit me when I actually caught COVID because it really messed me up. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't stand up and make tea for myself. Like it really brought me back to like almost an infantile state where I couldn't do anything on my own. So I couldn't move. Nobody could see me. I'm in isolation for 14 days. So I'm just like, who do I have that I can rely on? Do they really love me as much? You know, but then, you know, these things, these demons just pop up in those moments. It's like solitary confinement. So it was really rough. So on top of just the element of like, okay, I'm a child. I can't help myself. I can't even cook for myself. I can't speak. And actually, if I speak, I think it was really scary. At that point, I kind of faced the like, okay, I might actually, I could die, you know? So it was really scary on that end. And also just not being able to speak after going through everything I went through vocally and, you know, improving my voice, I kind of just did a whole reset. So all the fears of not being able to do music and be an artist came up. So it was just compacted and it was just really, 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 really rough. I actually had to take a month.
I'm interested. How did your contemporaries feel? Who sometimes maybe, you know, we have a sense of invincibility about us. You know, come on now. You know, yes, you know, we may get it, but it won't impact us, or that it happens to other people. How did your contemporaries, of your age group? I mean, did it wake them up? Did it like, what lessons learned in it all, if any?
Well, I think I'm of the age where people were pretty much responsible about it. I think it came down to, for me and my friends and the people that I associate with, we kind of like we have a lot of vulnerable conversations. So we really just kind of put the emphasis on respecting everybody else, you know? So, you know, we had how we felt, or they had how they felt. Like however they felt about it, it was really just more of a communal respect for everybody. People were really surprised that I was affected so bad. But the truth of the matter is I didn't tell many people about it.
Do you know how you get it? Did you know how you contracted it? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I was going to the gym, and this is what I meant when I said like
ages, you know, yeah.
I know, and here's the like the catch-22 about it, because like I was saying, like I was going back to crazy. Like I figured out a routine for myself to maintain like my wellness, like, and exercise is a big part of that. When I don't exercise, I really just get into this fog, and it's so it was one of the things that I had to, every day I went to the gym, have to make this decision of like, okay, I'm going out and I'm taking this risk. So I'm not sure. It could have been at the gym coming in, the gym coming out, or I was pretty rigid of like getting my work done. I wasn't really going many places, you know, so going to the gym, I mean, not the gym, but the supermarket and stocking up, it could have been anywhere.
Yes.
And I live in a multi-story building, could have been in the elevator, could have been anywhere.
Insane. I hear you. Well, thank you for sharing that, you know. So going forward, what do you see? What do you see as your work with all of these experiences you've had? You've been, you know, this new movement, social unrest movement of Black Lives Matter, COVID. You've come through that. How has that, I ask you again, going forward, as you're an actor, has it shaped you? Has it changed your mind about some things, your relationships with some people?
Absolutely.
What do you hope? I mean, what do you hope? What is hope to you going forward? We talk about hope on this show a lot, but what does hope look like to you? How can you manifest that in your work?
So this is just really my life's mission in a way. This is a great question. So one thing that changed it in me was, as I said, that COVID came back to me in March, and it felt like all of the anxieties that I had spent years of counseling and therapy and support groups, 12 step, I was just going everywhere to figure it out. It came back. And so I went on a trip by myself, just camping, and just wanted to spend time with myself. And one thing that I did realize was fear is the enemy. And so I just want to emphasize that in my art. What I have coming up is a bunch of, I've written a whole project. It's about self-realization and relinquishing ego.
Okay.
It's really about overcoming obstacles, internal and external. And really, I'm launching a YouTube vlog series where I can share my story of healing and hoping that inspires other people. Because another thing that I noticed also in all of these movements, that the core of it was always boiled down to fear,
Yes.
and when you get into fear, what I realized, because I was a victim to this, I realized like you're prone to these distractions. So you latch on to these ideas when you just, and we forget that we are just humans who want love. And, even if the officer is racist, he's really, I just learned forgiveness. I'll put it in a simple way. I learned forgiveness, and the first series of my vlog will be all about that and the emphasis of forgiveness, because I don't think there's any kind of healing for this world without it. So just understand, and it goes back to the compassion for self so that we can have compassion for others.
That's wonderful. Sim, we're going to have to wrap up, but this is so wonderful. I want to thank you again for being part of Mental Health and You. Compassion, self-love, forgiveness, all of those things, having respect, all of these things shaping ourselves as artists, as people going forward, and giving hope and giving love to others. What does that mean? But for Mental Health and You, Sim, we got to do this again. Thank you so much for being a part of Mental Health and You. Sim, you've been wonderful.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Find some love. Find some compassion, y'all. Give yourself some, and forgive yourself.
Right.
Going forward. From Mental Health and You, this is Cynthia Timms. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Peace and blessings all. Take care. Thank you.